Fang, you're really kind of the perfect person to be talking to in this context of like, what does crypto in Asia look like with your, early in your career at kind of the leading VC fund out of China, the first crypto or blockchain focused fund in Asia, really, to the corporate side, to your own fund. Can you kind of take us back to your early days at FBS and just kind of...
FBS is Fenbushi, by the way.
Fenbushi Capital.
For people who might not know.
And kind of the early learnings that you had there, and how it's kind of affected your path forward in your career.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. So my name is Jason Fang. I'm the managing partner at Sora Ventures. I joined the industry in February 2016 as an investment associate at Fenbushi Capital. At that time, I managed majority of the equity investment in North America. Moving forward, I left the fund in mid-2017, kind of like the start of the ICO boom. Reason for that was very simple. You as a private investor could invest in the deals yourself. Why work for a fund, right? So, and realistically, I joined the industry because I was more fascinated by technology than making money. So I ended up working for a portfolio company that actually at that time was Fenbushi's lead portfolio company. We had invested the most money and was backed by the LPs of Fenbushi. They did fascinating things. A lot of encryption and research on really understanding the real use case of distributed technology, DLT, and something called multi-party computation, MPC, which is basically encryption. Fast forward that, worked there for 4 months as kind of their head of global business development. So was in charge of mostly kind of like understanding the use case for anything that overseas, like anything to do with blockchain overseas. I was in charge of that. Really dive deep into understanding the real use case of blockchain, what is actually practical, what is not. And that was actually interesting because to some extent, that was a wrong move for every investment, for every investor at that time, yeah. Right? The proper move was like, you don't know anything about blockchain, blindfold, invest in anything that you can, as fast as you can, as much as you can, and you would have done really well.
Yeah. Right. And this is a company in China, in Shanghai, which is kind of the heart of the ICO boom, really.
Right.
Was there internal pressure to move forward with some kind of token project at that point, or was the company pretty?
The company was pretty strict. They dealt with a lot of what we call a lot of big players in China who are in the financial services industry.
So the opposite.
Basically, yeah. So for that reason, they couldn't touch cryptocurrency or digital asset. And more importantly, I mean, the CEO came from kind of like the financial traditional industry. So he was obviously fascinated by digital asset, but not to the point that it was, hey, we're gonna work on this. Interesting enough, they're actually working on something that's very similar to digital asset now. So the company is called Playton now. Yeah. And so going back to what I said, ended up learning more about blockchain use case, but that was a bad time to kind of really understand blockchain. Probably would have been better if I didn't know so much about blockchain and just invested as much as I could, right? So regardless, the investments we ended up making obviously was very profitable, to the point that we got a lot of interest from family office. At that time, a lot of people were kind of understanding, okay, this thing is actually making money not only just for individuals but for entities as well. So family office were basically asking us is like, hey, how can we be part of it? How can we take part in these ICOs?
This is mostly family offices in Asia?
In Asia. And unfortunately, I mean, at that time, there was really not that many ways to invest. You could either go through a platform, a third-party platform, which at that time was called ICOs platforms. You could inject money in there.
ICOH, ICO365.
Exactly. Yeah. You just put money in there, and then you load your bank account, and inside the web page, and then you start investing to ICO. And that was basically how it was done.
Were these family offices kind of testing it out with these
platforms? No, they didn't. They were like, this is very sketchy. Like they're gonna probably run away with my money, and they decided to back out, right? Yeah, sure. But then I realized it's like, hey, this means that we're eventually there's going to be interest in traditional players, and the lack of compliance means that there's actually interest for basically investing to entities that invest in cryptocurrency, but with proper compliance. During the September, the Chinese government banned ICO, and that was exactly when we launched Sora Ventures. the idea was very simple. It's like before Chinese government made any move, you could basically do whatever you want. But after the Chinese government banned ICO, it basically signaled a fine, basically a black and white. They basically define what you could do, what you cannot do. So that enabled me to basically decide, okay, what we can invest, how we're going to fundraise, and what we're going to fundraise in. We end up getting most of our money from family office, raised about 30 million USD, all in digital asset. So that's why, today I still think we're probably the first, Asia's first digital asset-backed crypto fund.
Sorry, just to jump in. So you said digital asset-backed, as in you took subscriptions into the fund?
Yes, in digital asset, yes.
Okay.
And at that time, you had to realize it's like, if you fundraise in the USD and invest in basically digital asset at that time, there was really no definition. Like, you'll be investing in things that you really don't know, and you'll probably require a license for that.
Right.
But if you didn't touch fiat, then there was really no, under any jurisdiction at that time, they couldn't do anything about it.
Right.
So it's just pure protection against the investments we're doing at the same time, the fund. But what's interesting is, at that time, there were very limited funds that had fund administrator, fund custodian, fund auditor.
Yeah.
We're probably the first to do that. That went really well. I mean, that basically set up the infrastructure for us and needed to fundraise from traditional family office. And we've been deploying capital. Majority of our capital was deployed in Q1, Q2, Q3 of 2018. And then in early this year, we had a pretty big transition in the team where we think the money is actually going towards secondary market. And so we're basically translating from investing into ICO more to investing into secondary market.
Right. And how are you guys structured? Are you structured as a hedge fund, as a venture fund?
As an open-ended fund.
Open-ended fund?
Yeah, which means it's usually a hedge fund. Yeah,
right.
Which means that usually you have a relatively short lockup, but at the same time it means you have the flexibility to have rolling capital.
Sure, that makes sense. And in terms of the focus, so you said you've moved kind of from the primary markets to secondary markets. Do you sort of have an overall thesis or overall kind of structure in terms of how you want to place your bets? Like, make some investments on cryptocurrencies, some protocols, some exchanges?
Yes, so our fund is pretty straightforward, 20% equity and 80% token.
Okay,
yeah.
But within the token aspect, so the 80%
yes.
tokens?
About 1/3 our company is gaming entertainment. 1/3 our capital all went into what we call incubator project, which is basically projects that we incubated. We work with basically the company, we help them list, we help them design the token economics, we lead the round, we bring in other investors, and we do one project every year. Yeah, the first one we did was Mythro.
Okay.
Yeah.
And any plans, or what's your second one or third one?
Off the slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. And what's the third? So you said the first one was gaming entertainment. Second is
the first one was actually entertainment. So that the first one is backed by a company. So the founder he was basically the chairman of a live streaming company called 17 Media, which is one of the largest software company in Taiwan, and their top 10 app on Apple in Hong Kong, Japan, and Taiwan. They basically do live streaming.
Yeah. No, I meant in terms of your portfolio. So you said that you have gaming and
yes.
entertainment.
Yes.
You have incubated projects, and then you have other
verticals. Oh, okay. So in terms of the industry focus, like industry sector, is 1/3 is in gaming entertainment. In terms of the deployment, 1/3 is in the incubator project.
Yeah.
Yep. In terms of the remaining, in terms of sectors, we do protocols and layer 2.
Okay.
Yeah. So industry-based protocol.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in general, is there something that excites you? I mean, more than other stuff at the moment? I mean, we've had you've gone through the different phases.
Yeah.
So we had things like Ethereum, 2015, 2016. We started. You were part of the sort of phase where apps were being developed.
Mm-hmm.
And of late, a lot of the exchanges have started gathering a lot of attention. In general, is there something that you think is going to be really big in 2019,
yep.
2020?
Yep. Well, like I said, our fund has basically transitioned more into a secondary fund. And I think one of the things we're noticing is there's a lot more financial products for hedging against the market.
Sure.
And this is very obviously, if you came in the industry in 2014 and 16, you will be 100% long crypto, right?
Yeah.
Like you've seen all the bubbles, all the little bubbles, and you realize that hey, all these little bubbles, they're like little pimples, so eventually every bubble is gonna be larger than the other one, so you just keep shilling and you just keep longing on all this crypto, you just hold, right? You just hodl. But obviously 2018 turned out to be a very different year, and I think a lot of people realize that, okay, well, even though cryptocurrency has brought a lot of wealth to a lot of people, people still lost a lot of money, right? And that means that, okay, as an institutional fund, how we gotta be flexible about things, and how can you hedge against the market, or how can you stay in a more neutral position so that even though you're investing into ICO, eventually you're gonna touch the secondary market. A lot of these token projects will touch the secondary market. How are you going to be able to exit?
Yeah.
Right? How are you going to be able to safekeep your position?
Yeah.
How are you able to make money in a bear market?
Does that mean you use derivatives and you have more traders in your company?
Yes. So basically, a few things. Number one is the infrastructure in our industry in 2018 was relatively weak. I will probably say that the majority of the infrastructure was probably more obvious in 2019. Obviously, people are still doing that. People are doing derivatives. A lot of people are still finding ways to do options. You name it. And more interestingly enough, people are creating all these exchanges that basically they're able to short altcoin, the popular altcoins.
Yeah.
Especially with kind of like the IEO that's happening.
Yeah.
Which these are all valid, but obviously you as an investor still have to understand who's running these exchanges behind. It's very possible that you put your money in, it's just gone, right? It's very high risk that someone's just gonna take your money, kind of like Mt. Gox, right? So these things you have to be careful, but regardless, there is a huge interest, a huge need for kind of like traditional financial products to be in the digital asset space. Not because I think obviously one is because as a hedge fund or as an open-ended fund, you want that. You want more flexibility to be able to hedge some of your fund assets. And number two is as there's more infrastructure in the fund in the industry, a lot more players will come in. We're talking traditional money.
Yeah. So in general, so how do you deal with the complexity of having 20% of your portfolio which is not liquid when you're open-ended?
Yep, side pockets.
Okay. So are these different sort of entities that you invest out of, the equity investments, or
no? We just side pocket them.
Okay.
Do you know what that is?
No.
Okay, so side pocket is basically very common in hedge funds.
Right.
Basically, it's a tool that enables hedge funds to basically separate liquid asset from illiquid asset, so that if an investor chooses to redeem, they can only redeem the liquid portion, and you don't count the illiquid portion. Once the illiquid portion becomes mature, then it goes directly to the investor. But this is usually over kind of the redemption period.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this could be like in 2 years or 3 years.
Okay, so that's your time horizon for the illiquid stuff.
Yes, but usually your side pocket is less than 10%, and crypto is slightly higher. Yeah.
Majority of your capital has been from family offices in Asia.
Yep.
And your projects that you've kind of incubated have been in Taiwan and
in Asia. Like the investments we make in Asia, we usually lead them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so how's the kind of as you're in touch with these folks, how's the sentiment changed in just the last 3 months of 2019? Are things kind of starting to turn around? We kind of feel sometimes like in Hong Kong, sentiment seems to be picking up a little bit and around different places. What are you hearing from your family offices?
Yeah, not gonna lie. One of the hardest thing as a fund manager is really communicating consistently with your investor. I mean, that's true for every industry, but for crypto industry, it's hard. It's very difficult because traditional family office, you gotta understand these people are probably asking for like 10 to 20%, right? And here you are, you could be losing 80% of their asset, right?
Or giving them a 10x.
Or giving them 10x, right?
Yeah.
Vice versa.
Yeah.
And that's scary. I mean, for them, it's scary. And a lot of times, like even for us, obviously, we try to be as transparent as possible. That's why we have these infrastructure third parties in place to provide that. And you can't just make up numbers, right?
Yeah.
But more importantly is, as a fund manager, you gotta understand that these people don't usually deal with situations like that.
Yeah.
And for that reason, you gotta be able to explain to them what the situation is, why is it like that, what are we expecting in the next few months, and how are they gonna make money back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think following up on John's question, so your fundraising process,
Mhm.
was it more outbound or did you have a lot of inbound requests in terms of?
Back then it was a lot of inbound. Understand that we were fundraising in late 2017, late 2018.
Late 2018?
17,
yeah.
17.
18
yeah.
would have been tough.
Yeah, I think would have been tough. Yeah, 17.
And where do you spend most of your time now? Mainland China or popping around?
Popping around. About half my time in Hong Kong, half my time in Shanghai.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are you seeing? Previous company, the more kind of traditional folks running this DLT startup. What are you kind of hearing from that traditional side of China, from like the corporates that you've been talking to there? What's their kind of sentiment on enterprise blockchain in China at this point?
Blockchain is very much though an innovation and a big plus to a lot of large enterprise in China. In fact, I think a lot of people are still very much interested in it. For example, Baidu posted a white paper saying that they're going to do blockchain, but with basically no token. But honestly, I think to some extent, number one, it's from any tech company perspective, blockchain, AI, VR are all like what we call innovations, and from their perspective, they don't want to miss out, right? It could be the next 10x. They could produce the next Google, right? You just don't want to miss out. So we understand that a lot of these tech companies are exploring this area. We're seeing a lot more interest companies doing something called reverse ICO, which is it's an equity company. They may issue a digital asset in a different entity as a strategy to help with the equity company, all done overseas. And that's interesting because CoinDesk in end of 2018 they posted an article that 2019 will be a year of enterprise tokens. Actually last year I posted an article on Medium basically saying that hey, I think next year or this year, following year, will all be like basically enterprise tokens. Like basically reverse ICO. All of these tech companies or startups will start going to launch digital asset, which makes sense. I mean, if you look at the models that actually work so far, is people like Binance, people who have like platform tokens. Nowadays, platform tokens are making so much money, right? And they're not doing any protocol from day one. They start off with a centralized business model, and they launch a digital asset, and then they try to aim for something that is more decentralized, right? Whether that product becomes fully decentralized and whether it's workable or not, we don't know. But at least there is clarity and like different phases and how they go from a centralized product into the centralized product.
I think more broadly about your funds, you've obviously tried to create a brand name around Sora. Is there a particular kind of a brand that you want to create longer term? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, the thing is this: it's like Vitalik basically said, in San Francisco Blockchain Week last year, that we need to have more products that enables large amount of people to achieve small amount of digital asset. And from day one, that's what we've been investing. A lot of U.S. funds like to invest in infrastructure layer 2, but for me, I feel like that's needed. You can build but the most important part is you have to invest in people. Like you have to understand that you have to invest in education, you got to invest in people, you got to invest in basically the process of converting non-crypto people into crypto people. And the best way, in my opinion, to do that is doing reverse ICO, which is basically having equity company with existing user base and slowly converting that user base, educating them into crypto holders or digital asset holders, and use digital asset to their own benefit, right? Very, very, very similar to what Bitcoin was. When Bitcoin started, no one knew what it was. People just started mining it. Over time, there was the purchase of pizza using Bitcoin. Over time, it became more of gold, right? Whether the next cryptocurrency is similar to Bitcoin in payment or in credits or in gift cards, whatever. My opinion is we try to invest in things that will basically spread the use case of digital assets and actually have a real plan to execute this.
Cool. Yeah.
Is that how you describe what your kind of strategy was with Alpha Slot most recently?
Yes.
How's the kind of traditional, really not much more of a traditional business in Asia than casinos in Macau?
Yeah. So the idea is this: is like casino is one big area that I think if you can get into, you'll be able to get a lot of people to really use cryptocurrency. I think obviously using the terminology cryptocurrency can be quite sensitive in certain jurisdiction. I like to probably reword to more of a digital asset. Realistically, you can present digital asset in front of user through a medium like a phone or through the hardware without actually introducing the term cryptocurrency. And that can be done. You can have off-chain, on-chain. It's probably like 20 to 30% blockchain, and the rest is off-chain. But it's okay. I think the idea here is you don't always have to produce something that's 100% decentralized from day one. And although a lot of projects last year were like full protocols and full decentralization or close to full, decentralized, we like to stick with things that are more practical. We think that from day one, if you're going for basically start something that's fully decentralized, very hard to achieve. But if you start off with a centralized product, slowly work your way into introducing some form of decentralization, whether through the launch of digital asset or a smart contract, then you're more likely to achieve some form of distribution in your system. And then when the time is right, explore decentralization.
Yeah. I think that's a good note to end the interview on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
For sure.
Cool.